Would the princess be sad, relieved? How would she be tonight, now that all this is out?
She is relieved that at last the lying is over, the masquerade is over, the whole thing is out in the open.
Queen Elizabeth II refers to 1992 as an Annus Horribilis, a Latin phrase meaning a horrible year. It was a year that 3 royal marriages collapsed. A fire destroyed more than 100 rooms in Windsor Castle, and an extremely heated scandal involving Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, spooked Britain and the monarchy. With tension rising between the Queen and the media, the royals were unwillingly thrust into the spotlight. In a nutshell, the Queen desired compassion and fairer coverage in a year which she felt had allowed her neither.
It is possible to have too much of a good thing.
Prince Charles and Princess Diana's relationship is a sad story. Their marriage was contentious and their divorce messy. Through it all, nearly every single dramatic detail played out in the global press. On the day of their wedding, Diana expressed doubts before walking down the aisle, especially after she found a bracelet Charles made for his former girlfriend Camilla Parker Bowles. Diana's sisters had said it was too late to call the wedding off, and so Diana had decided to go through with it.
Even then, things were starting to unravel a bit, because I don't think it matched what Diana had expected.
It is safe to say that her feelings for Camilla have been an essential part of their failed marriage, as this is something Diana found very hard to disregard.
She had this vision, like a fairy princess, and being carried away into the sunset. But the minute she was married, her husband was off working. I mean, it was, you know, he's always been a very hard worker, and he was devoted to his duty.
An estimated 750 million people watched their nuptials at St. Paul's Cathedral, on the day Diana wears a dress by Elizabeth and David Emanuel. They'd been on the rocks for a very long time, and people had seen the cracks from a very early stage, as early as 1981 during the couple's honeymoon, when Charles had spoken to his former girlfriend Camilla just before leaving for his trip.
On the honeymoon, she was so in love, but he spent a lot of time reading books, which she didn't really quite understand. I think on the honeymoon, it was when her bulimia, which she was already having a problem with, really took hold.
There could be several people here tonight who will reach a state of mental imbalance in the next year or so.
Eating disorders, whether it be anorexia or bulimia, show how an individual can turn the nourishment of the body into a painful attack on themselves.
It was a symptom of what was going on in my marriage. I was crying out for help, but giving the wrong signals. And people were using my bulimia as a coat on a hanger. They decided that was the problem. Diana was unstable.
Instead of looking behind the symptom at the cause, what was the cause?
Cause was a situation where my husband and I had to keep everything together.
But I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become, nor the extent to which it would affect both my public duties and my personal life in a manner that's been hard to bear.
In February of 1992, on a trip to India, the two have been seen more as strangers than a couple. Their first public kiss in almost a year caused speculation in the lack of romance in Charles's pursed lip peck, which landed on Diana's ear.
He leant forward to kiss her, and she moved her head away. which was the classic picture, because this is a woman who is just longing to humiliate her husband, and she humiliated him in front of the world because the picture went all over the world.
It wasn't just the matter of a kiss that had the media swaying between the story of Charles and Diana in India, but also a solo trip that Diana made to Taj Mahal. Historically, the Taj Mahal exists as the eternal monument of a husband's love.
And there she was, all on her own.
And this had put the royal marriage in the spotlight.
She looked very wistful, and she'd never looked more lonely. So it sent out a message to the world, I am all on my own.
There appeared to be circulation in which maybe Charles's kiss was an attempt to make amends for her solo trip to the Taj Mahal. But as we come to see it later, there was more to the story. In May of 1992, Andrew Morton published a book, Diana, Her True Story, a sizzling tell-all of the collapse of their marriage. This book was a chance for the Princess of Wales to present her side of a highly public story and fundamentally change the course of the British monarchy in the process.
That story is the truth, and people obviously will try and deny it and try and construct the fairy tale, but for once, people were prepared to be honest about the Princess of Wales. And if this book's about anything, it's about people being honest.
The book exploded onto the scene, blowing away the face of a fairy tale marriage between the Prince and the Princess of Wales. It became an overnight seller.
When the serialization of the Morton book appeared in the Sunday Times, the Prince of Wales's press secretary faxed a copy, an early copy of the newspaper through to Highgrove. Arrived, I think, at 6 in the morning, and Prince Charles was aware that it was happening, and it said, I think the front page was, Diana's 5 suicide bids for uncaring Charles. So, I mean, it was so explosive, and they had some guests staying, and I think Prince Charles, he didn't know what to do, so he just went out for a walk to gather his thoughts, and then he went upstairs and he confronted Diana, which must have been pretty horrific. She ran down the stairs in tears, out of the house, into the car, and drove back to London.
This book dove deep into Charles's affair with Camilla Parker Bowles, to her own mental health struggles. After Diana's death in 1997, Andrew Morton updated this book to Diana, Her True Story, in her own words.
No one had any idea that Diana was involved with the book at all, and in fact she even denied that she was at the beginning.
He confirmed that Diana herself had been the main source of his book, and that his new version contained an 18,000-word transcript of tape recordings made by the princess in secret in 1991 and 1992, in order to enable Morton to tell her story.
So she decided that Andrew Morton was a nice sort of intermediary to put these words out, and he was a friend of her friend, Dr. James Colhurst. They played squash together. So she thought, oh, I will tell James, and then James can take the tapes to Morton, and that way we'll never meet. You know, this was planned sometime before the book came out. So the book came out in the summer of '92, but this all took place the end of '91, the beginning of '92.
In these recordings, Diana talks deeply about her unhappy marriage, her bulimia, her feelings about Camilla and her parents' divorce. The publication of this book caused controversy in Britain. Morton was accused of commercially exploiting Diana's death. Buckingham Palace threatened to have the book banned, and the Spencer family, deeply distressed, sought legal advice concerning ownership of the tape recordings. Following on from a troublesome year for Charles and Diana, the 4-day Korea tour in November 1992, was intended to reassure the public that the royal couple was not splitting up. Their marriage had broken down significantly by this point, and onlookers said it was obvious that they were near a divorce.
And it was very important. And it had been organised between the two countries by the Foreign Office, and they had to go. Diana did not want to go. By this time, she couldn't even stand to have Charles near her, and vice versa. Charles knew they had to go, the Queen knew they had to go, and Diana knew that she had to go, but it was a disaster.
A reporter covering the tour said that there was a hatred that radiated between the two on the trip, according to Express. They have been reported as looking so miserable that they were described as the glums by the British press.
I mean, they just were stony-faced the entire time, so it actually was a PR disaster, basically. Photographically, I mean, they obviously did their bit, talking to the right people and things, but photographically, you've never seen a couple look more distant.
Things didn't improve between Charles and Diana during the course of the trip, during which some now iconic pictures depicting the emotional distance between them were snapped. Like this shot of the pair attending a presidential banquet at the Blue House in Seoul. In unhappy snaps from the trip, Charles and Diana were seen looking distant and melancholy when together. Articles were made with these images on the front page, with all sorts of headlines. Charles and Diana were in Korea to portray the image of a loving couple, but this was far from the truth. Divorce is pretty frowned upon among the British royals, but the announcement had been made of the couple going separate ways in December 1992, a decision so final that the British Prime Minister John Major announced it.
And when John Major stood up in Parliament and announced that there was no other people involved, we all thought, well, I bet there are, because there always are. The Queen was at Sandringham. She was staying at Wood Farm, and she just put on her coat and went out for a walk. This is a very royal thing to do, this going out for a walk when there's a big drama, just to sort of gather your thoughts. And I think she just thought, well, it's probably for the best.
Charles and Diana were together for 11 years before they formally separated. Both continued their royal duties apart. The public separation proved to be a turning point for the House of Windsor.
In Diana's heart, she never wanted to leave Charles, but she was desperate. She'd had enough, and it was just so unpleasant. Although she knew she didn't want to leave Charles, being with him was worse than leaving him. So yes, she did want to leave him, but she didn't want to get divorced. She always hoped they would get it right in the end. After Panorama, the Queen realised that this couldn't go on. The Queen is head of the church, and the last thing she wants is a divorce. And so she must have thought about it very, very carefully and decided that that was the only way forward to stop all the tittle-tattle and the Waleses and Diana and the battle of the War of the Waleses. It had to stop. So she basically ordered them to divorce. And it was a letter that they both received, hand-delivered just before Christmas. And there was no going back then.
In March 1992, Buckingham Palace formally announced that Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, were separating after 6 years of marriage. Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson are seemingly in the shadows of Charles and Diana. But their story is just as fascinating and dramatic as you can probably imagine. From their first introduction in 1985 during the Queen's Dine and Sleep events at Windsor Castle, to their high-drama separation in 1992, when photos of Ferguson with a new lover sent the royals spinning, only just months later.
What first impressions did you have of one another in that case?
Very good friends.
A, very good friends, and B, well, it was at lunch, wasn't it? That
Yes.
We were made to sit next door to each other at lunch at Ascot.
Yes, and you made me eat chocolate profiteroles, which I didn't want to still.
I then didn't have it, so I got hit. Then it
Very
started
hard.
from there. I think that's probably where it...
I was meant to be on a diet.
And that was the basis of a romance.
I would just like to thank you all for the most wonderful welcome. And also, I would like to officially declare the 1989 Nipper One Agricultural Fair open.
The grounds of Buckingham Palace rang to the happy cries of photographers today as Prince Andrew and his fiancée, Miss Sarah Ferguson, promenaded and kissed for the benefit of the cameras. The polished performance followed hard on the heels of the appearance of a palace official with the universally expected announcement of their engagement mid-morning. It generated intense excitement among the press, and also enthusiasm among the several hundred non-professional spectators gathered outside the gates. Meanwhile, inside, the royal couple was showing off the ring, which Prince Andrew said was made by engineers and Miss Ferguson said was designed by the Prince himself. They were also asked about the proposal.
I'll ask you then, Miss Ferguson. Do you remember what he said?
Absolutely. But I'm not telling you.
Prince Andrew and Sarah married in a grand royal wedding held at Westminster Abbey on July 23, 1986. 2,000 guests joined the couple at the Abbey, while a television audience of 500 million tuned in on the wedding day. Andrew and Sarah shared their first kiss on the balcony of Buckingham Palace in front of a crowd of nearly 100,000 people.
The crowd asked for it, and the crowd got it. The kiss. The grand finale to a perfect day when everyone had difficulty suppressing a smile.
After the Buckingham Palace balcony moment, the wedding celebration continued at Claridge's Hotel, a favorite of the royals. Andrew and Sarah then left for their honeymoon to the Azores, which also included a 5-day sail on the royal yacht Britannia.
So this is where I live, not here, but down in Portland.
This is it? This is the environment within which you have to live?
There's a very good fish and chip shop down the road, so that'll be useful.
Where on earth did you find that out from? Have you been hunting this morning?
Yes.
Sort of thing that you've been sort of scouting around for various bits and pieces. But do you like it down here?
Well, I can even cook then.
What? Thank you very much indeed.
You can live on fish and chips.
What an awful sort.
Yes, I do. I love it down here. Now, but only because Andrew, I want to be a good wife to you, and so therefore I will love it anywhere I go, as long as you like it and it's your career.
Ow! Just squeeze my fingers. Ow!
Kiss her then.
Why do you want me to kiss
Go
you?
on, hurry up.
Why?
Hurry up! Start filming, quick. Go on, dare you.
You're a monster. Oh, God, don't fall over the top of the wall.
The wedding presents have been arriving by the hundred. The palace won't say exactly how many.
You can hear it now. It's a singing monkey. It's almost as bad as that singing birthday card I sent to Mother.
I know. Andrew, what should we do with these?
Oh, must be kept for the children. eventually.
They enjoyed a beautiful marriage together in which they welcomed 2 daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie. But their relationship started to unravel later on.
She made a special effort to chat to an 82-year-old lady who had waited outside the hospital for 2 weeks.
It's nice to see them. I love the babies.
Why do you follow them? Why do you like them so much?
I love the royal family. Nobody can say no wrong about them.
While the Duke was left holding the baby, the palace announced she would be called Eugenie Victoria Helena.
Despite raising their 2 daughters together, the couple were apart often. Prince Andrew's demanding naval career meant the couple only saw each other for roughly 40 days per year.
I think this is almost time I should go, but never mind. Somebody's telling me it's time to go.
Sarah has been noted to have spent her first pregnancy alone, in which she has said, "When Beatrice was born, Andrew got 10 days of shore leave." After barely 6 years of marriage, Prince Andrew and Sarah legally separated.
But I think that it's a fantastic job. All 3 services, it's a fantastic job for a single man. It's getting less and less so for a married man.
And would he get back in time for that new baby in March?
And they usually will try to get naval personnel of all ranks home for babies. Particularly more so second babies than first babies, believe it or not, because, of course, the mother's not there to look after the first one. In my case, that's slightly different.
Boy or a girl this time, what do you want?
I don't mind.
You don't mind?
I'd love either.
Following on from their announcement of separation in March 1992, photographs were published of the Duchess topless in Saint-Tropez with American oil tycoon John Bryan just 5 months later.
I remember seeing it and just going, oh no, Sarah. And that's when Carolyn, my best friend in the world, do you remember Carolyn? She said to me, now you need help, Sarah. And I remember ringing her saying, Carolyn, this is what's happened. And she said, you know what, you need help. This is crazy. What is happening here? And of course, you know, went through that. And I think it's an extraordinary tale.
The photographs showed Texan Mr. Bryan kissing and sucking the topless Duchess's toes and the arch of her foot. They also showed the couple kissing and embracing in the pool, and the presence of Sarah's 2 daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie.
It's been a difficult and controversial 12 months for the Duchess, with the breakdown of her marriage and the row over those photos. During 3 days visiting sufferers of motor neurone disease, she said her charity work had helped her cope, but that the priority was still to maintain her own family unit.
Adding to the scandal, one photograph captured 2-year-old Eugenie looking on as Mr. Bryan kissed her mother. It was the first time the royal family had been seen in such an intimate yet intrusive way. Sarah's ties were largely severed with the royal family from that point on. Despite the grandchildren she shared with Andrew, the Queen no longer included her in royal events, and Andrew's divorce was officially finalized in 1996. Sarah also officially lost her title as Her Royal Highness.
Andrew and I speak every day, and it's very important that we do keep that huge friendship, which we've always said we are. And it's great, the children, we all have a great time.
Has what's happened changed your view of the world?
It's made me very much more thoughtful and made me very much more aware of trying to control my spontaneity a little bit so I don't fall into awful great big poo traps and the ramifications are too much for me to cope with.
Was that a fault? Was that something you saw as a fault in yourself?
Oh, I think so. I think I made huge faults, don't we all? Make huge mistakes. We've just got to live and learn and get on with life. My life is very much just, seeing each day how it is, helping people as much as possible, looking after my girls, and hopefully in the months to come, the laughter and and the joy will come springing back into it.
A shared interest in equestrian sport brought Anne together with her first husband, Captain Mark Phillips, an Army officer whom she married on November 14, 1973, in Westminster Abbey. The wedding was watched by an estimated global audience of 500 million people.
Do you think you'll make a good housewife? I mean, can you cook, for example?
Well, that's hardly up to me to say that.
Cook scrambled eggs, we can recommend this.
Would you like to cook Captain Phillips' breakfast before he goes off to work, for example?
I can manage that. It's easy. Especially when he's eventing, because you're not going to get more than a cup of coffee.
Phillips had been Anne's teammate at the 1971 European Championships and was a member of the three-day eventing team that won the gold medal at the 1972 Olympics.
When exactly, may I ask, did you decide that you were serious?
That is a difficult one. When it became mutual, I think it was even, well, I suppose after badminton.
Phillips was a commoner and never took a title of nobility, with the result that his and Anne's two children are simply called Peter and Zara Phillips. Peter was born on November 15, 1977, and Zara on May 15, 1981.
With the temperature just above freezing, Princess Anne came out. But instead of stopping on the steps for a moment for the large crowd, as she had promised, she just had a few quick words with the hospital staff. Nurse Zora Achroff held Paddington Bear, a hospital mascot. Two-day-old Master Phillips was carried out by Sister Delphine Stevens, the midwife who was present at the birth. Well wrapped up against the cold, he was handed to the princess, who, ignoring normal advice, sat with her son in the front seat of the car. And off the couple went to Buckingham Palace for lunch. They'll be staying there until they move to their new home in Gloucestershire.
The hospital was under tight security today, with pressmen and well-wishers kept well back from the entrance. In fact, it was hospital staff who found themselves with the best view. Before leaving, the princess stopped to thank the midwives and staff. Captain Phillips, hidden behind the nurses, leant forward and gave his daughter a rather bemused smile. The princess, joking with the nurses, said, "She's quiet, isn't she?" a reference to the fact that the new baby hadn't given her much time to sleep over the weekend. We couldn't actually see, but it said the baby has wispy blonde hair.
After Zara's birth, Princess Anne and Phillips were rumored to have marital troubles. The pair were hardly seen together, and both were thought to be involved in extramarital affairs. These problems caught the public eye when, in 1985, Phillips fathered a love child with a New Zealand art teacher, Heather Tonkins. Heather Tonkins fell pregnant to Mark Phillips after a one-night stand in 1984. At the time, she was working as an art teacher, and Phillips was still married to Princess Anne. The affair happened after Phillips met Tonkin at an Auckland riding clinic. When Phillips returned to New Zealand a year later, he invited Tonkin to his hotel room. When Tonkin discovered she was pregnant a month later, she called Phillips to reveal the news, and Phillips had told her to have an abortion. She refused, and Phillips paid her a monthly amount through an associate, claiming it to be payments for equestrian consultancy, the Daily Mail reported. In 1991, Tonkin made the affair public, as well as the paternity test. "I'm just doing what's best for my child. I hope and pray Mark will do the right thing and make a proper and legal binding settlement on her," she told the media at the time. The couple separated in 1989 and eventually divorced in 1992 after years of marital strain. As if the year wasn't hard enough already for the Queen, a fire wrecked part of her home in November 1992. It destroyed 115 rooms, including 9 staterooms.
When we walked in, we knew that 9 staterooms had been either destroyed or very badly damaged. But on top of that nobody really recognised until you really saw it, was the extent above those rooms. There was about 100 bedrooms with all of the bathrooms that went with it, all the staircases, and indeed all of the internal structures of the towers.
Windsor Castle is the oldest and largest inhabited castle in the world and has been the home of British kings and queens for almost 1,000 years. It is an official residence of Her Majesty the Queen and is still very much a working palace today, home to around 150 people. The fire started in Queen Victoria's private chapel, where a faulty spotlight ignited a curtain next to the altar. Sadly, within minutes, the blaze was unstoppable and had spread to St. George's Hall next door. The fire was first spotted around 11:30 in the morning. 3 hours later, 225 firemen from 7 counties were battling the fumes.
I saw hundreds of fire engines parading about, fire bellowing out, terrible it was. And knowing that the grand reception had gone up in St. George's Hall, I was very, very upset.
At the peak of the operation, they were using 36 pumps, discharging 1.5 million gallons of water. The fire was finally extinguished at 2:30 a.m. on Saturday, the 21st of November. It had burned for 15 hours.
We saw all the smoke go up. I was working just outside the car, in the driveway at the moment. Rushed in and helped with all the removal of the equipment and the furniture.
Next came the restoration task. The fire damage was so extensive that it would take several years to repair, with the final bill estimated to £36.5 billion.
Restoration work at Windsor starts next month. Not all of it is to be put back as it was. The private chapel and the adjacent rooms are to be done in a more modern style.
But lessons learned from a major fire at Up Park House near Petersfield in 1989 were to be of major benefit to Windsor.
By the time the fire had happened at Windsor Castle, we were well into the conservation restoration project at Up Park. So we had laid out the fragments which were found in the smouldering ruins of Up Park, and we'd uncovered the material and the design of those ceilings. So we had a pretty good idea by then of 18th century, early 19th century form.
We broke the project down into its component parts, and that gave rise to 250 separate packages of work, which I think is unprecedented in modern construction.
What sort of things are they looking for?
Well, things like damaged chandeliers, pieces of plaster moulding from the ceilings, damaged plaster work from the walls, that sort of thing which will be very useful in the long-term restoration of the castle.
Fire came from St. George's Hall over the roof, and most of this ceiling collapsed, including the chandeliers, the highly ornate mouldings, and fell on the floor. And eventually was pieced together through a huge jigsaw puzzle.
5 years ago, the fire spread into this room, destroying a late Georgian wooden screen and devastating the ceiling. The damage done to St George's Hall, which was built in the 14th century, came to epitomise the destruction wrought in Windsor Castle.
St. George's Hall was restored to a design close to the room's original 14th century appearance, but with a 20th century reinterpretation. A new hammer beam roof was constructed from sustainable English oak, using traditional methods and tools.
40 oak trees were used to produce this ceiling. Some of the 200 carved shields were salvaged from the fire, others are reproductions. This portrait of the Queen Mother is among the works of art which was saved. Restoration experts believe the room is now in better condition than before the fire. Those who live and work here say that's true of the entire castle. The spot where the fire began in the original chapel is marked by a plaque. The chapel itself has been completely rebuilt, and in a personal touch, Prince Philip helped design the stained glass window, which depicts for posterity the fight against the fire.
The Queen was struggling with a furious backlash after members of the public refused to fork out the money needed to go ahead with the restoration of Windsor Castle. Prime Minister John Major had said that the taxpayers would fund the restoration, but this received a widespread revolt from the public. In response, the Queen opened parts of Buckingham Palace to the public, with money raised from the £8 entry charge going towards Windsor Castle. This covered 70% of the repair bill. She then also donated £2 million of her personal wealth to the refurbishment. However, her home would not officially be restored until November 1997, 5 years to the day after the outbreak of the fire, and the 50th wedding anniversary of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh.
Looking at it now, is it better or worse than you first feared?
I think now, as the damage is gradually being assessed, it's perhaps not quite as bad as we thought at the time. For example, the floors seem to have escaped remarkably in some areas.
The Queen gave a speech 4 days after the Windsor Castle accident at Guildhall to mark the 40th anniversary of her accession.
Well, 1992 was the worst year of the Queen's life. She gave a speech at the Mansion House in London towards the end of '92, and she said she was going to refer to the year as an Annus Horribilis, and we all knew why.
This also forms part of a subtle change of gear by the royal family in an attempt to update their image in the wake of the scandals that hit them last year.
She spoke in a raspy voice.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an Annus Horribilis. I suspect that I'm not alone in thinking it so.
Her daughter's marriage had broken down. Fergie and Andrew's marriage had broken down, but far the worst thing was the breakdown of the marriage of the Prince and Princess of Wales and the official announcement that they were going to split. And then on top of all that came the fire at Windsor Castle on the Queen's anniversary.
A woman who had spent much of her life fortifying the monarchy as a pillar of British life through stoicism and tradition. She was keenly aware that 12 catastrophic months had put her record under threat.
No section of the community has all the virtues, neither does any have all the vices. I am quite sure that most people try to do their best, to do their jobs as best they can, even if the result is not always entirely successful. He who has never failed to reach perfection has a right to be the harshest critic. Indeed, I suspect that there are very few people or institutions unaffected by these last months of worldwide turmoil and uncertainty. This generosity and wholehearted kindness of the corporation of the city to Prince Philip and me would be welcome at any time, but at this particular moment, in the aftermath of Friday's tragic fire at Windsor, it is especially so.
Everything had gone wrong. And then right on top of that came what we called the Charles and Camilla tapes. And they were published in January '93. It was a conversation Charles and Camilla had. It was very intimate, and it was absolutely horrific, actually. And I think people thought, Charles can never be king. This is, you know, he talks about what he would like to be doing to Camilla in a very intimate way, and it was horrible. It was really, really horrible, and it must have been the most embarrassing thing that could happen to anyone. I mean, regardless of the fact that Camilla was absolutely charming and said how wonderful he was and how much she loved him, and you saw that this was a true love affair, but it was just awful. And I think all the foreign press was saying, no, there's no way this man can ever be king. It was that embarrassing.
1992 was most certainly a horrible year, only amplified by the scrutiny of the press.
The Queen hints at change but pleads for understanding.
The monarchy has evolved over 1,000 years. It has had all sorts of circumstances running against it, but it has survived. It has gone as far as saying that the family can emerge even stronger.